Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome back. So we are today going to cover the other colonies of British North America. Recall that we have talked at some length about Virginia, the Chesapeake region, and we've talked also about New England. And I presented these as culture zones, as two distinct cultures. Today we're going to talk about 2.5 more such cultures that existed in British North America at the time of the Revolution. Before we start, let me remind you that labs are due this Thursday. They're turned in by email. All of this is written out. There's a checklist, and I urge you to go through the checklist before you hit the send button on Thursday night. Okay. The main points today are that British North America can be seen as 5. I'm going to vacillate a little about this number 5, as you'll see. But 5 cultures, they're sufficiently different from each other as to make the United States seem unlikely. I put it this way because I think I mentioned this once before, but I think it's important when studying history to remember that the things that happen aren't necessarily the things that are most likely to happen. That seems a little bit of an oxymoron. But it's true. I mean, if you were alive at that time, looking at the way the world was, you might not have expected the United States to form, based on the differences that exist between these five cultures that we'll talk about. And we'll talk about two. The other three I'm going to fill in. Oddly, the real commonality, maybe the commonality that held these 5 cultures together close enough to form the United States, was their shared experience in the British Empire, from which they just rebelled. The second point is that many of these differences can be attributed to the timing of each colony's growth. And I'm trying to present this story as growth against the backdrop of a growing and rapidly growing and changing and very, very successful British Empire. We've talked a bit about the 16th century, or sorry, 17th century, the 1600s. Today, it's going to be the 1800s that we talk about, and that's really the British Empire's most fabulous century. And so, an outline, the way I propose to do this, is first to talk about the 5 cultures of Britain's fabulous 18th century. Then discuss the middle colonies. These are New York and Pennsylvania, and they're characterized by prosperity, diversity, and trade. They're not like the Chesapeake. They're more like New England, and yet there are some important differences, as we'll see. Secondly, I will be talking about South Carolina and the Deep South. I won't say very much about the frontier at all. It's here because I want there to be 5 cultures so that we can be parallel to the American culture's requirement, which recognizes five cultures in current-day America. But both the 5 and the cultures, at least on the previous slide, were in quotes. Right? So cultures is in quotes because I don't really know how to define culture. It's a difficult concept. There are lots of different definitions. It's a useful idea, and in this case, at least in the case of the 4, New England, Middle Colonies, Chesapeake, and Deep South, I think we can identify political structures and economic structures that make these people and their behavior sufficiently different that this is an interesting thing to talk about. We can contrast the people who live in these regions. The 5th region, the frontier, it's most interesting, perhaps, because of the people who live there. They tend to be a plurality in most places in this region. This is the Appalachian region. Are Scots-Irish, and Daniel talks a little bit about the Scotch-Irish in chapter 4. They are an interesting group, and we will have occasion to mention them again. They're a dissenting Protestant group that winds up transplanted from Scotland to Ireland and then squeezed simultaneously by Protestants from above and Catholics from below. They are the most numerous, aside from African slaves, the most numerous immigrants during the 18th century. So they are an important group. But this region is so sparsely populated that it's difficult to talk about, and it spans so many jurisdictions. It's very difficult to talk about economic structures and political development in the same way that we can in the other regions. So it's worth pointing out. I'm going to come back to it. We're going to talk about it again, certainly in the context of Andrew Jackson later on. Frontier is obviously an important part of the American psyche, and it's operating right here. There are conflicts between the people who live in that frontier region and the people further east, particularly about Indian policy, for example. Anyway, I'm going to concentrate today on the middle colonies in the Deep South and contrasting them as best I can with the New England and with the Chesapeake region. Okay. And I promise to sneak the frontier and Scotch-Irish in later on. Okay. As I want to also say, I think it's important to pause, think about this approach, looking at these different cultures, because we are American cultures, of course. And to emphasize my uncertainty about what cultures mean, let's reflect for a moment on what the American culture's requirement defines as the 5 American cultures. Does anyone know what they are? They are what you'd expect. They're European American, Asian American, Native American, African American, Chicano, and Latino. Those are defined today as the 5 American cultures that make up American culture's requirements. And we're going to certainly talk about all those groups at least a little bit. But I want to point out that in a different point in time, those groups, those 5 American cultures, would have been called races. And similarly, some of the groups here, some of the groups that we deal with, which we'll think of as nationalities, would have been called races at this time. In other words, the Irish, for example, will most certainly have been seen and called a different race by the English. Okay? So all these terms change in meaning, and it's kind of interesting. We'll see that unfold as we run through the next couple of centuries. So let's start with let's move then to Britain's fabulous 18th century. I have a list here, a not complete list, of England's wars in the 18th century. It is not necessary to write these down. It's not necessary to memorize them. I only come up here to impress you with how many of them there were. And you notice that some of them even overlap. A couple of places here, there's more than one war going on at a time. But I have three things to note. First, there's a lot. The second thing is that these are worldwide wars. They're not just in Europe and North America, but many of these wars have battles taking place in India, as well as Africa. The Boer Wars, these Carnatic Wars are in India. The third point is that all of them are against the French in some way or another. They don't all start out as England versus France, but France and England are in all of them, and they're on opposite sides. Fifth, while in the beginning, there is a religious or ideological component to some of these wars. For example, the Williamite Jacobite War in Ireland, these 9 Years' Wars. These are still against Louis XIV, and so there's a bit of constitutionalism versus absolutism, Protestantism versus Catholicism going on there. There are ideas at stake. But as we move on through these various wars of succession in Mr. Jenkins' ear, and in particular the French-Indian or 7 Years' War, these are trade and empire. There's not much here except winning real estate and trading rights. And with each successive win, and England, by the way, wins all of them except which one? Which one? Yes, exactly right. This is the only one. And it's not a, well, we think it's a big deal. They did not. So each time they win, Gibraltar after the Spanish succession, after the French and Indian War, they get Canada, Hudson's Bay. In 1709, I believe, which I think is in the, must be 1714 then, after the Spanish succession, they also get the asiento, which is the right to trade slaves with Spanish possessions. So each time they win, they get more stuff, and each time they get more stuff, they become more successful at winning further wars. Yes? Parliament. Well, I should say that again. By the end, it's Parliament. By the beginning, it's the king. And I think it's much like the United States. The king probably could start a war, and Parliament might have back him. But in all these cases, because England has no standing army, at least until the end of this period, he's got to go to Parliament to get taxed, to raise taxes, to raise an army. So the Parliament does have a fair bit of control. But the net result of that is this what used to be called the triangular trade, and it's now called the Atlantic system. And it's this three-way trade where manufactured goods from Europe travel to Africa, are sold, exchanged for slaves, are then brought to various places in the New World. So we've learned mostly about sugar islands. And then colonial products, which are mostly sugar, but also, as we'll see, will include rice and tobacco, and some refined sugar products. Those then go back to England. And by the end of the 18th century, England owns the slave trade. It's the dominant sea power. And it's the country that carries most of the slaves. England owns most of the sugar colonies, because they've taken them from the French and the Spanish. They have the North American continent, which is also producing trade goods. And so they own all the colonial products, which they ship back to Europe and sell. And around it goes. And at the end of by the 1750s, by the mid-1750s, the Industrial Revolution starts where? England. So England really owns all three legs of this by the time we get to the end of the middle of the 18th century. They are doing great. And they have a very clever way of doing it. Rather than tax, as I mentioned, the king doesn't have a direct right to tax. He has to go to Parliament to ask for taxation. So starting back in these Williamite wars, let's see, with the 9 Years' War, what the king began to do was to sell bonds. Right? That's not a new trick. I mean, lots of monarchs have borrowed before. But the way the British did it was a little bit different. They promised never to, well, they did not promise to pay back the principal. They promised to carry the interest forever, and they paid high interest. So what that created was a national debt. A national debt that was owned by the aristocracy, the same people whose in-laws and cousins served in Parliament. Right? So the king could raise a lot of money by paying high interest. With that money, he could win the war. But then when the interest debt came due, he could go to Parliament and say, well, we need to pay the interest on this debt. And Parliament, who either held the debt directly or their cousins and in-laws held it, wasn't going to say no. So the system could go on. And as England was victorious in these wars, their empire kept growing, the tax base kept growing, trade kept growing. So the debt then shrank as a proportion of the economy, and they could just go on and keep doing that. So the invention of the managed national debt is kind of the unsung hero of England's great 18th century. All right. Okay, so while all this is happening, and while England is getting rich on colonial products and slaves, I emphasize the importance of slaves in this, because slaves really are two legs. They're not only commerce themselves, there's profit to be had in buying and selling slaves, but products, most of the colonial products, most of the cash crops that are grown in the colonies, sugar and tobacco, and these are slave crops, slave products. So slavery is a big part of that. And while they're making all this money, some of that money, no doubt, went to fund the Industrial Revolution. So we really can, an argument can be made that slavery really is the basis of English success. All right, let's turn then to the middle colonies. The middle colonies, which I described as tolerant and full of enterprises. These are, as I said, more similar to New England than to the Chesapeake. The economies here in the middle colonies, and when I'm talking about middle colonies, it's New York and Pennsylvania mainly. You can include New Jersey and Delaware, but they're kind of roundabout error at this point. They're small states, typically have the same governors, New York or Pennsylvania. These middle colonies are not as dependent on slavery, at least not directly, as the Chesapeake. But that's, of course, not to say that there was no slavery. New York had 21,000 slaves at the time of the Revolution, 1790. Sorry, that's after the Revolution. And that was more than any other northern state, but they also have a relatively large population. But what these middle colonies do is trade. In this way, they're similar to New England. New England also makes lots of its money on trade. But the other thing they do is grow. And they grow, this is not an easy slide to see, but this is the percentage breakdown of the populations between New England, the middle colonies, and the South. Now, the South, recall, includes both the Chesapeake and the Deep South that we'll talk about today. You can see that in the early 1600s, of course, it's all South because it's just Virginia, and then there's some New England. And New England, you can see grows very rapidly. But around about 1680, 1690, we can see the growth of the middle colonies. Now, the growth of the South and New England are largely natural growth, meaning that it's an excess of births over deaths. There's very little immigration to New England or the South other than slaves after 1680, because anybody with any sense would go to Pennsylvania or New York at that point for reasons that will become clear, and that's where in fact, immigrants go. So this growth in the middle colonies here is fueled by both natural increase as well as immigration. And you can see that it's quite significant. As you go from 1680 or 1700, the percentage of the total colonial population that's represented by those middle colonies is growing pretty rapidly. Unlike New England, the middle colonies have religious toleration right from the start. We talked about the kind of religious freedom that the Puritans were interested in. That was, remember, the freedom to do only what was good and righteous. They were interested in Puritanism, not religious tolerance. That's not quite the case with New York and with Pennsylvania. And part of that is that they grow up after the 1680s, after the Glorious Revolution, during the Enlightenment, a time when religious toleration is favored by people who are thinking. That was not the case so much in the early 1600s. But it's also because of the way these colonies grew up. New York, as we'll see, is originally a Dutch settlement. It's originally founded by the Dutch West Indies Company. And the Dutch are kind of the inheritors of the Portuguese trading system. You remember when we compared the Spanish and the Portuguese system, the Spanish interested in conquering empires, the Portuguese were interested in establishing trading networks all around the world. Well, the Dutch follow very much the Portuguese model. In fact, during the period that Portugal is occupied by Spain in the late 1600s, the Dutch, in fact, take over a lot of Portuguese trading colonies. They also have a settlement starting in the 1620s in New York. Well, it wasn't New York, then it was New Netherlands. And it was driven by commercial interests. It wasn't a settler colony. They were interested in trading fur. So tolerance, in the case of New York, comes from the fact they were trading. Right? It's really, if you want to trade with people, you kind of can't persecute them. Right? Or at least, I think that's true. It's harder to persecute them if you want them to buy your stuff and sell you stuff. In Pennsylvania, in Pennsylvania, tolerance comes basically because William Penn is the founder, and William Penn is an unusual person. He's a Quaker. And Quakers are, in some ways, even more radical, religiously speaking, theologically speaking, than the Puritans are. But Quakers are also a persecuted sect. So William Penn recognized the value, both in terms of moral goodness and in terms of profitability, to welcome people with different religious views to settle in Pennsylvania. So as we'll cover, the original frame of government of Pennsylvania includes religious freedom. All right. Just briefly, the history of New York, what's interesting about it is that the Dutch West Indies Company starts out trading furs, and they only turn to land speculation when the fur trade sort of flattens out around the 1620s. And they institute what's known as the patroon system, and that's unusual among the colonies. They make big land grants to wealthy people in return for them promising to bring settlers or cattle. Right? So their idea is they own all this land, they have control of all this land, they want to add population. Same idea as Virginia Company, but instead of trying to get individuals, they try to get big landowners to come in an almost feudal system, and rely on them to bring population. When New Netherlands falls to the English, first in 1664, it's a very small colony. New Amsterdam, anyway, is really only that tip of Manhattan, right under that line. It's really quite small. Manhattan still is all farmland and wilderness. But when England finally takes it in 1674, it's done without a shot being fired. The English surround the place, and the Dutch see reason, and they also see that the English empire is growing. They see how that triangle trade works, and they see that since the 1650s, the British Navigation Acts have impeded their trade with the North American colonies. So it's not a bad deal for them, and they agree to become English without firing a shot, and they begin anglicizing their names. Interestingly, because it's a negotiated settlement, because they do get something in return, and what they get is liberty, religious liberty, among other things, and that's granted to them by James II, who is at this time the Duke of York. James II is an interesting figure because he's the last non-constitutional monarch of England. At this point, he's not the king of England; he's the brother of the king. But he becomes the king in 1685, and when he does, he is unable to impose the same kind, to grant the same kind of religious tolerance in England as he does in New York. James II, interestingly, is a Catholic. This is a weird accident of English history. I've spent a lot of time here telling you how much the English hate the Catholics. Remember, Bloody Mary was back in the 1550s, and they've been hating Catholics pretty virulently since then. But they deposed the Stuarts in the Civil War, and so the Stuarts lived in France for a while before they were restored in the 1650s. By the 1680s, James II becomes king, and since he was raised in France, he turns out to be Catholic. That's bad enough. But as a Catholic in a country that is persecuting Catholics, he's naturally in favor of tolerance, not just for Catholics, but for all the persecuted groups, because they would be allies then. His pushing of toleration for Catholics is one of the reasons, one of the proximate causes of the Glorious Revolution, in which he, James II, is deposed and replaced with a constitutional monarch imported from the Netherlands. The other proximate cause was his audacity in having a son. When, in addition to religious freedom, James also grants New York a legislature. This is a common trick. I mean, that's sort of an echo. We saw Edwin Sandys granting a legislature to the Virginia colony. But the New York legislature came back and proposed a Charter of Liberties. Again, an interesting document because it's a little bit ahead of its time. James said no to this one, but the Charter of Liberties is still an interesting document because, once again, it's foreshadowing things that happen in England. It grants individuals a whole lot of liberties, the right to vote, due process, trial by jury, liberty of conscience, to all Christians, which would include Catholics, property rights, sanctity of contracts, all these things, which a few years later will wind up in the English Bill of Rights, but only after James II is deposed. Well, let's see. In the end, New York, I think, brings with it two legacies that it brings to the foundation of the Republic. One is a tradition of freedom of the press, and this is most clearly seen in the trial of John Peter Zenger. You may have heard of a famous case in which a journalist, John Peter Zenger, writes all kinds of very scurrilous things about a governor named William Cosby. He was arrested and held incommunicado for several months. But despite all this, a sharp lawyer from Philadelphia named Andrew Hamilton winds up convincing a jury that Zenger should be acquitted. And he's acquitted for the reason that what he said about the governor was true. That was a novel defense and an interesting principle. This is where we trace that to. So with that, what following from this idea that you could print things that were true, even if they were seditious and libelous, what follows from that is a politics that is very factional, and New York has a very factional politics, but within certain limits. Right? And if you sort of hold your mouth right, you can think of that as the basis for a loyal opposition. And this is a new and interesting idea, similar to something that's developing in